welcome back to Robin Minds, the National Youth Debate, and now we're going to be talking the economy and security. We have a set of brand new speakers representing Team Atiku. We have Ayobami Adekojo. For Team Tinubu, we have Alabi Obeyemi. And of course, for Team Obi, we have Paul Obonaya Jr. Thank you very much. I called them in that order, and before we got on stage, we did have a raffle, and they're going to be answering your questions in that order. So starting with you, Team Atiku. The candidate talks a lot about privatization. That seems to be the core of what he believes will trigger Nigeria's economy. A lot of people are not very excited by that term because they sort of associate it with corruption. Why should we believe in this time?
Thank you very much. With privatization, we have to understand that where the world is going now, we need to incentivize competition. Everywhere you go, everywhere you look, people are doing new things. Despite the failure of the states in several sectors in Nigeria, people still tend to believe that the best thing is for us to invest or look for a new messiah, as some people are trying to push out. But the important thing we have to do is to make sure that Nigerians themselves are able to own and control a lot of things. This is what we did by liberalizing the telecommunication sector. We have Glo, MTN, and Airtel today. When Glo came in with per second billing, it completely changed everything. Imagine if the government was still in control of that. There are several things that we can bring out from privatization. With our refineries, every year we do turnaround maintenance into billions of naira. Ajaokuta steel is still owned by the government. No steel has been produced, and people have graduated into collecting pensions from something that is redundant. We need to open business up for Nigerians. Nigerians need to own. That's why we are going all way into even land, ownership of land. This is not about occupation or anything. We need to improve our process.
Thank you very much. Let me come to you, Team Tinubu now. Your government, your candidates seem to talk a lot about government spending, almost like, putting more government money is going to trigger the economy. There's some talk about infrastructure development and creating millions of jobs. We don't know the hows of a lot of these things.
Tinubu, as the governor of Lagos State, has been able to create a sustainable environment that allow businesses to come into Lagos State, both the private sector to thrive and also the public sector. If there's one thing that Tinubu has been able to achieve, it is uplifting the local economy development, local economy. There's one thing we call the local economic development, which allows the local market, the local economy to strive. This will definitely increase the output of every businesses in Lagos. And every success, when it comes to business, all the success starts from Lagos. And these things are the works and duties of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been able to implement a lot of things. Part of it are this oracle of the thing. He has been able to block some of the loopholes, which has reduced government spending to some ghost workers. And if Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu becomes the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, you should be rest assured that a lot of its antecedents that he has brought into Lagos will be replicated at the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on now to Team Obi. I think the mantra we hear a lot is from consumption to production. Consumption to production. There's a lot of trial and error that's happened over the years about trying to make Nigeria more productive. Borders have been closed. We've had all of this, plans. It sounds exciting to hear, but how is that supposed to happen?
Okay, thank you for that wonderful question. First, I want to say that antecedents for any individual who wants to go into leadership will give a direction to his president. And that is what P2B has done as a private and public individual. First, on the economy, where we talked about from production to consumption. I will make an analogy. When you drop a little of honey on this floor now, all the ants are going to gather to that direction. But when you drop it in different directions, you see the ants will be split. That is what P2B stands for, diversification of our economy that has depended so much on oil. And we talk about sports. So far, Nigeria, we've underrated the impact of sports to our economy because we have age-long ancestors who do not understand the innovative leadership in the 21st century around the economy generations of sports to the Nigerian economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, he did mention a lot of what his candidate has done and is going to continue doing. Do you have a response to that?
First of all, the previous speaker for Team Asiwaju also said a lot of things about Lagos. The beauty of what we are bringing in restructuring is that states can make their own laws, because it seems to me that they are pushing another Lagos governor. We are talking about a state of a country of 36 states, and they keep talking about Lagos this, Lagos that. In his response, he was talking about what the private sector in Lagos was able to do. He's basically campaigning for Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. None of the things he mentioned was done by the Lagos state government. Lagos was built on enterprise of the free spirit, of the free mind. People come here, and private sector is able to do a lot. A lot of things that are going on in Lagos, the free trade zones and everything, they are private sector investments. And he's basically telling us that he doesn't even agree with his candidates on a lot of government spending, and we should bring the best minds into this place. That's fine. If they want a third term for Asiwaju, I really don't mind for us to devolve powers to the states. States make their laws. Governors can go for a third term here. That's fine for me. And then Lagos people can enjoy what they feel is the best for Lagos. But we need to be verbose and talk about the larger country here. He's not bringing solutions that can work in Zamfara. What happens with the gold mining in Zamfara? Do you put it in private sector, and do you bring public or private sector partnership or not? But if we keep talking about Lagos, I'm willing and ready to let them have a go to continue to rule Lagos. But we need to move the country forward. Thank you very much, Ebuka.
How different is your plan or your candidate's plan from privatization? Because in some people's minds, it might be the same thing. Consumption to production means you want to empower more people to do things on their own and build production chains. Is it different from privatization in any way, where you want more money being controlled by the people, if I may use it that way?
I'll start with the talk of privatization that has been the mantra of the PDP. And so far, P2B, like I said in my earlier statements, that antecedents would give direction to the president of every leader. And P2B has not moved to privatization of the economy, because this is going to bring a downfall to our economy. One of the big problem of our economy is the big straw into our coffers. And one of the P2B's mantra is, I'm going to block leakages, which is what the PDC are scared of. Leakage, because they have put a big straw into our coffers.
Now, your response to him.
There's a difference between privatization and creating sustainable environment for private sectors. If I have to judge by what Atiku Abubakar has done in the past, privatization means selling government properties to his family and friends, if I'm right, which you agree with me, by the way. So, and when it comes to public-private partnership, we are talking about creating sustainable environment, which Lagos State has done. And one of the reasons why we are using Lagos State as a pivot point for this campaign is because you can't tell me you want to become the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria without good track records, even at the local government level. And if you want to develop, if you want to prove to Nigerian youth that are educated and non-educated, to people that we admit that are one of the smartest young people, not just in Africa and in the world, you have to come with one or two things that you have done in the past. But unfortunately, when you're talking about privatization, you're trying to convince me here that Atiku is coming back again to sell the rest of the thing he forgot to sell there. And this time, we need not just a president that can work. We also need a vice president that will head the National Economic Council, not to sell our private sectors, but to enhance them, create sustainable environment, and make more foreign investors to come into Nigeria. Thank you.
So you have two people to respond to now. Very good.
I will start with my friend in the Labour Party. I think this is the problem with, last-minute jumping of ships. Because Peter Obi as a governor, or even when he ran with Alhaji Atiku, was in favor of privatization. As a governor, he gave the schools back to the churches and hospitals as well. We were on 13-month strike in Anambra. I don't think he seemed to care because he had given the hospital back to the churches. So this is something that he campaigned on in 2019. But the problem is that he moved to a labor platform that was built by the Trade Union Congress and the Labor Congress. So now there's a quagmire. He doesn't know what to do. He's on a socialist platform as a capitalist. He doesn't believe in state-owned aviation sector, for example. But in the Labour Manifesto itself, they want the state to have Nigerian Airways, like had this Sirica's pipe dream for the past 8 years. So this is the problem that he has. He's on a platform with gentlemen like this that are probably Marxist in their thinking and their name, and don't know that this is a capitalist, while he's in SUG politics with his own Marxism that, oh, if you put a big straw or this thing. This is basically Buhari 2015 campaign. The straw, let's remove the straw. Where are we today? There's a bigger straw. So when I come back to my friend here, actually privatization, like what was done in Lagos State, Bodilon, the famous Bodilon was owned by the state. You can fact check it. The governor of the state, he lives in a house that was owned by the state. So if you talk about selling property to friends, that is terrible. TVC land was revoked from people.
We're out of time. We need to be fair with the timing. You can make the points in the next conversation. Very quickly now. Still starting with you now because I want to talk figures. Because we all know what's happening right now with the Naira. I think everybody here feels it. Anyway, first up, inflation numbers were released during the week by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, 21.82% inflation. Many people dispute that number. People believe it should be higher even. But that's even up from 21.34 in the preceding quarter. There's a lot of belief that inflation will continue to skyrocket because there's a lot of plans by virtually every candidate to remove fuel subsidy. That is going to affect food inflation and just the cost of living as a whole. What is your candidate doing to mitigate this?
Buhari's administration got loans from the CBN via Ways and Means into 22 trillion. That's basically money printing. So at the end of the day, he wants to recolor the Naira to call the money that he printed back. 2019, we were all talking about what? Market money, trader money. I'm happy that they didn't give these gentlemen money to go and share in the markets this time. The VP was flying from state to state, sharing actual cash. This is the same cash they are trying to take back into the banks now. So they printed 22 trillion. Before Buhari came, Ways and Means was under 1 trillion naira. So now we are talking about 21 trillion in printing from a CBN governor that is a partisan member of the APC. Now, he went ahead to do another 1 trillion printing. He called it Anchor Borrowers Program, and they gave it to farmers. No farmer paid anything back. That's another money that they blew into the economy. Guess what? Farmers bought him a ticket for him to be president. I mean, these people have taken on a ride. What my candidate will do to mitigate inflation is the same thing that they are fighting against. Instead of going to the CBN and turning it to a vote to get 21 trillion, we are going to sit down with the private sector and see what investments the private sector can make into the economy so that we do not have to continue this reckless borrowing of money. Because apart from the Ways and Means, they took Euro bonds as well. They took several loans, and this has made the economy very hot, and they crowded out the private sector, because that is what happens in the economy. When the government is borrowing too much, you crowd out the private sector because it is sure money for banks to give to the government instead of the private sector.
Thank you. Same question to you. And I always want to state the fact that your party is in power. And the concern for a lot of Nigerians is how different are you going to treat an issue like this that was pretty much the continuation of what we have right now?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to tell my friend here that I didn't hear any solution from the question you asked him. He just trying to point out that the fact that Emefiele is a member of the All Progressive Congress. But I want to let one thing to be clear to Nigerians, that we are here to debate about our presidential candidate. And yes, fact, President Muhammadu Buhari is an APC member. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is also an APC member. But they are two different peoples. At the same time, it is a good policy, but unfortunately, it's just it came in a very, let me just say, it came at a very wrong timing, and it came in a time that Nigeria were not prepared for. So if there's one thing I want to assure you is that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has a very great plan to support Naira circulations and to make sure that Nigeria get access to what they need. You can see it in his previous campaigns in some states. He made it loud and clear that there are some changes that needs to be made. And Buhari's tenure is different from Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu tenure. I just want to assure you all that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to do the right thing. Thank you.
I smiled when my colleague here was saying that Asiwaju is different from Buhari. And over time, we've heard that he's the national leader and he knows how to identify leaders. That is the pointer that he has identified a failed leader for Nigeria. In respect to subsidy, two of my colleagues here have failed to talk about the most important thing about the subsidy. We have the corruption subsidy and we have the real subsidy. And so far, the two candidates have been running along with a whole bag of corruptions round about them. And over time, my principal P2B have said, if there is any corruption charges against me, I will stop campaigning. This is over 8 months, and none has come with such. So, to address the Naira issue, and he said he came in a wrong timing. So, should we expect another wrong timing for Nigeria come 2023? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your response to that?
We have to understand something that's
a different entity on its own. And if the federal government at this point in time is interfering not just with the CBN, but with the Supreme Court and other arms of the government, it shows that President Muhammadu Buhari is not practicing what he calls democracy. And if the CBN deemed it fit that this is what they want, and a certain president, our own president, President Muhammadu Buhari, has seen their policy as a policy he cannot just quickly override, but to take his time and find solutions to it. I think the president deserves a round of applause for that. So we are running a democracy here, we are not running an autocracy. So we don't expect the president to just go to the CBN and just turn the decision around. But I can assure you all that things will be done and we all have Costos' mind. Thank you.
Yeah, your response.
Thank you very much. I don't know what time you wake up today because the president addressed the country today and he said he instructed the CBN to do this. So for him to come back and talk about this issue would be watching his president. But one thing that I can say is that there is already a consensus that President Muhammadu Buhari has failed, which is why this gentleman is trying to separate his candidate and is saying that Asiwaju is different from Buhari. He has also told us now that the APC does not have a long-term plan for Nigeria. The confidence they gave to Nigerians in 2015, they want to stop it now because they realize that they have pushed a man that has failed. This is consensus, and I like that at the very least we have a consensus that the APC has failed. What he is saying now is that they want to renew the hope with another APC candidate. Nigerians are saying you have failed. You don't even have a plan. Nigeria used to have a plan. You know, we had Vision 2020 and several ones. I'm standing here talking about President Atiku, incoming President Atiku, sorry. And I'm talking about his VP days. I'm talking about what the PDP did. That is what the PDP wants to do. The PDP wants to liberalize the economy. The PDP wants private sector in the economy. The PDP wants more Nigerians to be able to make money, to be billionaires, to create jobs. That is what the PDP did from 1999 until we practically let the barbarians through the gates in 2015. Now, we are saying that what the PDP did, what we know that the PDP did, this is not about trial and error or something new. Nigerians as wives now.
Thank you very much. Let's quickly move on to security now. We'll probably wrap up with the economy after we're done with that. But I think this is extremely important. So I'm going to ask a general question and we'll go one after the other, because I think every single person here understands what's happening in the country. In the past, it looked like these things were sectional, but it's pretty clear now that every corner of Nigeria is affected. It's also the one part of national discourse that a lot of Nigerians are not sure or clear on what the candidates are going to do. We keep hearing, I don't want to reveal my plans. Tell us why we should vote your candidates, starting with you, Timothy, why we should believe that your candidate has the capacity to solve the security problems, plethora of security problems in Nigeria today?
First of all, my candidate is the only one that has traversed the country, that knows the country in and out. He's the only one with presidential experience. He's the only one with federal experience. We are talking about two people that govern sub-regional units. The biggest headache they had in Lagos, MC Oluomo, they bought him over. Biggest headache in Anambra was probably, thugs and kidnappers. But Atiku Abubakar as a VP, they had the Sharia issue. And as a northerner, he went into the north to talk to the northern governors. This is what we should be doing. They had the Bakassi issue. As the VP, he went into the creeks, he negotiated with them. So this is not, we are not talking about, disputes or skirmishes in Oshodi with thugs or, we are talking about real issues here. You have to trust my candidate because he has the capacity to do it. He's not going to just, abrogate thugs into his system and say, oh, now we have a clean state. As long as you pay me a cut of whatever you are making at the parks. With insecurity, our major message is restructuring. By the time you restructure the country and you devolve powers, we are going to have state policing. In my state right now, I'm from Oyo State, we have what they call Amotekun, and everybody can attest to the fact that the security is much more better in Oyo State because now people are able to police themselves. If your name is Dayo Israel, your policeman's name is probably Otumba Israel. They went to school together, they know each other. So if you go AY and start doing something wrong, they can police you effectively. This is not about bringing somebody from a totally different place to police people, then there is some animosity between them. We are going to devolve powers to the states. The states are going to be able to police themselves. We are going to have community policing. And only my candidates, let me land on this point, has the capacity to restructure this country because he has a big coalition in the country.
Most important thing in government. And I would like to go back to what Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has done in Lagos State. I will keep mentioning Lagos because, as I said before, you need to point back at what you have done before you can convince a certain person to vote you. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu remains the only and the first governor to ever try and subsidize the pain on the federal government. Currently in Lagos State, we have what we call Lagos State Security Trust Fund. It was the first thing, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu was the first governor in Lagos State that set that up. What is the essence of Lagos State Security Trust Funds? Lagos State Security Trust Fund is where public and private partnership people come together to sponsor and fund security in Lagos State. Currently in Lagos State, if you go to different axes in Lagos State, you find cars, you find bikes that are being sponsored by this initiative. And before Asiwaju became the governor of Lagos State, between 1991 to 1999, you can attest to the high level of insecurity. And before we can have a good economy, before we can have other things going well in Lagos State, security is one of the most important things that we need to bring in. And I want to protest my opposition point, which he said about Atiku Abubakar. I studied at Federal University of Technology in Yola, and I can tell you that during my days there, it was a living hell because of the insecurity in that state. At a time when they were ruling, the PDP, the Boko Haram had about 70 local governments under their control. And each of these local governments, you see the Boko Haram flagged up. And Boko Haram became more stronger when these people, when they were in government, they squandered a lot of money, the arms fund and a lot of things, which he can attest to when he was, his leader was the vice president of Nigeria. So Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a man to trust when it comes to security. Thank you.
By the 1999 Constitution, that the democratic citizenship, it's guaranteed for his life to be protected at all costs by the government. And my fellows and debaters have talked about restructuring of the security architecture as what their candidates are about to do. It is one thing to say something, and it is another thing to do it. I would want to ask them, how many convoys do their presidential candidate move with in comparison with my presidential candidate? That should point you to one who is willing to tackle security head on. In 2014, Anambra State was declared as the safest state in Nigeria by the then IGP Abubakar Mohammed with the Operation Mensa. At that beginning, I went to Nnewi to start up Mwaboy as the popular thing to learn mansion pass. So I was live in Anambra State. Governor Obadiniju handed over Mazop and insecurity to the nation. But with the coming of P2B, Upper Iweka became a silence and a very peaceful place for people to walk at night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to get a little more personal now. Let me start with you now. Like he did mention, a lot of conversation around the fact that militancy didn't necessarily abate under the presidency of President Olusegun Obasanjo and Vice President Atiku Abubakar until President Yar'Adua came in and brokered that deal with the militants. There's also a lot of conversation about the fact that Boko Haram started to birth in that time. We also can't forget the conversation around Deborah Samuel, the young lady who was murdered by a mob allegedly for blasphemy, and the infamous deleted tweets now. So there's a lot of talk about, is he going to protect certain interests when it comes to security because of religion?
That's a three-pronged question. I'm going to start with the fact that he said Atiku was VP when he was in Yola. Perhaps he shouldn't be on this stand because it's a youth debate. Because that's really impossible. Now, to your questions, Ebuka, I will start with the deleted tweets, right? A terrible thing happened, really terrible. A young lady was murdered, she was accused of blasphemy, it happened in Sokoto. One way or the other, people that do not care about the prosecution of these people want to put it on a candidate's tweet that was deleted or not. Now, a tweet was made in the middle of a back and forth between several people, and the candidate felt the best thing is for them, the Sokoto state government, to intervene, prosecute, and arrest everybody that was involved in this, which is what the federal police had promised, the Sokoto state backed by the Sokoto state government. My candidate was the only northern politician, the only one. I wish Kwakwaso had somebody here because he was a supporter of Sharia. The only one that said we cannot, at the expense of his political career, he was the only one that stood against Sharia. This is somebody that has stood in defense of religious freedom over and over again. He has done it several times. In fact,
thank you very much. Personal question as well, because this is still very fresh in a lot of Nigerians' minds. NSARS is literally less than 2 years ago, or less than 3 years ago. And your candidate has been linked in so many ways, whether it's by the toll gate or by things he's said, not being sympathetic and understanding the need for police reform. That was a defining moment for a lot of young Nigerians, and it looked like that might have alienated some people from him as a candidate. How do you work that back?
Well, first and foremost, I want to let you know that during the event of the NSAS, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu was highly sympathetic. To an extent, there was a time he started picking direct calls. And apart from that, let me go back to what the Lagos state government did then. The Lagos state government set up a panel to investigate what happened at the Lekki toll gate. And not just set up a panel, they also went back to previous things that had happened there with the youth and the police force. And I can tell you authoritatively that a lot of people were compensated when this event happened. And when it comes to police reform, if you check the manifesto, you can agree with me that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has a lot of plans for the Nigerian police. He has plans to increase their welfare packages. He has plans to increase their machineries. He has plans to increase their recruitment and a lot of things. So when it comes to the police reform, it is written in the Asiwaju manifesto that a renewed hope will also be allocated to them. Thank you.
Pretty personal, I guess, as well. The police officer James Nwafo continues to come up when the name Peter Obi comes up. He was governor when this travesty happened in Anambra State. His defense continues to be that the state governor is not in charge of the police. But it's also very curious to a lot of people that a state governor was not aware that something that grievous was happening. Even if he couldn't do anything about it directly, he never spoke up until it became a national conversation. How does he walk back that?
Okay, like I said, when those massacre happened by the FSAS in Anambra State, I was in Anambra State as an Onwa boy learning machine parts business at Onkonewi. And when those reports came in, P2B was there live on ground to check that. And a panel was set up, report was taken, sent down to Abuja, and yet nothing has been done. And we all agree to the fact that the police, the SAS itself, is a federal institute directly from the federal government, which is why in the greater Nigeria, P2B has said that there will be a restructuring of the police form, where we have police, we have the federal, states and local vigilante, which is something he has set up already in Anambra pre his contention for the presidency of this nation. And so far so good. We have seen that he has already started the implementation of this process by reducing the overwhelming weight of police force around him.
Anybody have a response again?
Yeah, thank you very much. Because the question, the problem is we have victims on record accusing Governor Peter Obi himself of using CSP James Nwafo to attack them. The victims wrote petitions to the Judicial Committee. Victims came on Arise TV channels, they wrote articles. In fact, he was invited to the panel, and the gentleman that is supposed to, bring in a new Nigeria did not even go to the panel. He didn't attempt to go and defend himself. This is something they tell us that, he's ready to defend himself everywhere. But he has never said anything in particular about what CSP James Nwafo did, despite the fact that several victims have been on record and they said, he sent James Nwafo to destroy my hotel and kidnap me. There are video clips everywhere. There is the petition to the Judicial Committee. So this is not something that the governor did not know about.
45 seconds to respond to that.
I will respond to the presentation.
Who sponsor him as a PDP federal presidency, who should address the panel that was set up by P2B. So the onus is on him to answer that question, why they did not act on the panel that was sent to them.
You want to say something?
I just want the both of them to learn from Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu that no matter how the situation is, either it is federal, local, or government or local government level, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu can take care of it. When Babajide Sanwo-Olu set up a panel in Lagos State, he took care of everything himself. So if Peter Obi at then could be telling people that this is for the federal level, that means that he's not even ready to be the president of Nigeria. So I think that's my take. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to start with the massacre. Governor Obi, just like what Governor Sanwo-Olu did, invited the army into Anambra. Again, fact check. He called for the army to come into the state. The next thing, bodies were floating on water. Several years later, Governor Sanwo-Olu calls the army into the state. The next thing, bodies were floating on the water. His candidate says, who are they? Why were they there? What type of characters are they? Is this the type of man that young Nigerians want to vote for when they stood up there in Lekki that night? And when we talk about state capture, what happened when they switched off the lights? His candidate's son owned the company that switched off the lights. Please let me land on this point. That is the type of state capture we talk about. They abrogate it for themselves. He's even talking about friends and family. This man's son owned the company that switched off the light that night.